I'm Pamela Tanner Boll, the producer and the director of of the film To Which We Belong, which is about regenerative agriculture. And the real interesting thing about the film is that it's about how if we restore our lands, we can draw down, some people say, enough carbon to really have an impact on this climate issue that we're having. But we can also grow healthier food and farmers can be paid for their work. So we're here today to catch up with two of the folks who were in the film. I call them the Berns brothers. It's Keith Berns and Brian uh, Berns, and they're from Bladen, Nebraska. We filmed with them back in 2019. And one of the things that they were doing back then, besides having a very large farm of that had been in their family for a couple of generations, they also had started a cover crop seed business. So the cover crops, I'll let them explain why that matters. But so I'm here to catch up with them. And I guess the first question I'd like to have each of them talk a little bit about who they are and where they're from, and then we'll get into why cover crops matter.
Sure. Thanks, Pamela. It's great to be here and catch up with you again. So my name is Keith Berns, and along with my brother Brian here, we've been farming here pretty much all of our lives. I did take a little 10-year hiatus and taught school for a while right out of college before I came back to the farm when Dad retired. Yeah, been here all of our lives. Love the land and what it means to us and our family, and I think that background as farmers really helps us relate to our customers through the cover crop seed business. So I'm more active on the cover crop side of things, so I'll probably be talking a little bit more about that. And Brian is much more active and involved in the farming operation itself, so I'll let him introduce himself and a bit of his background.
Okay, Brian.
Yeah, so I guess went to school, went to college in diversified ag, and came back to the farm back in, I guess, I got married in '88, and that's when I started farming. But Keith and I had been farming some ground even before that when we were in high school. But so, like you said, it's been a multi-generational thing. And we transitioned from conservation tillage to early '90s. We went to no-till. And then, we started hearing more about, cover crops and soil health and getting to the point where we are today with regenerative ag is kind of the new buzzword, so to speak. But, some of the practices that we've done, and maybe we'll go into this later, but, we're trying to move towards that regenerative ag movement, but yet I think it's still quite undefined. Everybody's trying to figure out what that really means. But that's on the farm side. We still maintain it about the same size as we were when you were here filming. And we have added a few things, but I mean, that's kind of a basics of what we have. Both of our families live on the farm and the seed business is on the farm. So we're very family oriented. So that's a little bit about me, I guess.
Okay. Well, why don't we just start with you since you're here?
Okay.
Plus, in a nutshell, for a lot of people who are watching this may not have seen To Which We Belong, which is about regenerative agriculture. Can you tell us in just a brief sentence or two about why you're not tilling and why you're using cover crops now?
Originally it was to save moisture, to increase yields, which I think it definitely did. And then as we continue to go into the process, we realize that tillage, destroys the soil and disrupts a lot of the biology. And, and a lot of this stuff we've learned, obviously it's a journey, and we're trying to educate ourselves as well as, our customers on the cover crop side. But, it's really important that, basically the entire world in the existence lives, depends on that top 2 or 3 inches of topsoil. So we're trying to do everything we can. We've gotten into doing compost to try to reduce our synthetic chemicals and fertilizers and doing some things like that. We used to have quite a few cattle. We got rid of most of those few years ago, but we are trying to get back into livestock and integrating the livestock. With this last year, we actually had some sheep and goats on the farm, and hopefully next year we're gonna integrate some, maybe some grass finished beef cattle. So we're trying to make some of that moves. We're not organic. I mean, we do work with producers who are organic, but and I don't know that we're going to go organic, but we want to trend that way, in reducing our synthetic inputs, and but also don't want to do a lot of tillage either. So that's kind of where we're at with the farm. Our main crops are corn, soybeans. We do some rye for seed. We've done a lot of different things for seed, but I want to focus the farm, more on food products. What can we grow, for human consumption, and that's going to be a long process to develop markets and things like that. But that's the kind of the direction I would like to see us kind of move towards.
Great. Well, if you integrate, from what I've read, if you're integrating animals into your crops and your cover crop business, you're going to have more fertilizer on that land, correct?
Right. Yeah.
Natural
It's
fertilizer, less,
right.
perhaps less synthetic.
Right. It's, less management, less equipment, if you can graze instead of feeding and things like that. And, the trick is building the fences and the water and the infrastructure, because a lot of the Midwest has taken all of that out, over the last 50 years. And so now people are trying to figure out how to add it back. So, it's in a lot of ways, it's learning how to farm, the way our grandparents did.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thank you. Now, let's talk, Keith, a little bit about, since you're mainly doing the cover crop business, can you tell us first, what are cover crops? Why do they matter? And who uses them?
Yeah, great question. So, cover crops, there's nothing magical about them really. They're just simply plants, and hopefully a wide diversity of plants. But what makes them special is that they're not harvested for grain. They're not exported back off the land. So they're something that a farmer would typically grow in between their cash cropping sequences. So in between corn and beans, or between wheat and corn, or something like that. So they're grown in between the main cropping sequences in order to protect the soil, build the soil, cycle or produce nutrients, provide additional livestock forage, provide habitat for beneficial insects. I mean, there's all manner of different things that cover crops will do. But the main thing is that we're keeping a living root growing in the soil. And through photosynthesis, that's pumping carbon into the soil. So it's helping draw down atmospheric carbon. But really why that's important is because carbon is the food source for all of that biology in the soil. And so without a living plant, the biology isn't able to survive, it isn't able to grow. And so much of what goes on in the soil is directed through the biology. And so when we ignore that, then we lose the functionality that God created in the biology to interact with the plants, for cycling nutrients and making all these things available. And that's just really, really important in order to reduce the synthetics, like what Brian was talking about. We can't do that if we don't have the biological component really going. So who's using it? All manner of farmers, large farmers, small farmers, East Coast, West Coast, Midwest. We see people using it all over. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody's using it, but I would say there are producers in every ecoregion using it. But it's the thing that makes them all very similar is the mindset of, we want to reduce these synthetic inputs, partially for environmental reasons, but also partly for profitability reasons, because these inputs have gotten so expensive. So we're trying to reduce these inputs, farm in a little bit more natural way. And the way to do that is to get the biology back involved. And the best way to do that is to have cover crops out there, providing a habitat for them.
Isn't it also true, Keith, and Brian, you can chime in anytime, that when you have the land covered with cover crops, let's just say on the off seasons, you've got your row crops, let's just say you've got corn and I think you said wheat and rye, but in between, so you can grow the cover crops in between the crops, but you can also grow them in the off seasons. So from my understanding, that means that you've got more carbon being drawn down into the soil for a longer period of time. Because your plant, your corn and soybeans and other things that people grow, those will draw down carbon too. But you want a diversity because of the roots. Some of those plants have deeper root systems, correct?
Well, yes, that is correct. Not only deeper root systems, but different type of root systems, and each type of plant has a different set of root exudates. So root exudates is as a plant is taking CO2 out of the atmosphere, and it's combining it with water. It's creating glucose, which is a sugar, carbohydrate sugar that goes through the plant, and then a byproduct is oxygen. That's photosynthesis. Well, that glucose sugar gets turned into lots of different carbon compounds, and then many of them are leaked out through the root system to feed the biology. But not every plant has the same root exudates. So each one of them are a little bit different. Each plant provides different root exudates, and then each one of those benefits a different part of the biological profile. So the more plants we have, the more biology we have, the more diverse our plants are, the more diverse our biology is, and the more diverse that whole system is, the more resilient it is against drought, against insects, against diseases. Just, resilience comes from diversity. And that's the reason that when we plant a cover crop, we don't want to just plant a single cover crop, say cereal rye. If it makes sense, we'd like to add hairy vetch or rapeseed or something like that in with it. So now instead of just one additional plant growing, I might have 3 or 4. Or in the case of if we're growing wheat, we harvest that in July, I can plant 15 different things all together in July or August because the growing season allows me to do that. So it's just a great way to get diversity back into the system. Again, the way, if you look at our natural systems, that's how God created them, to have just a wild amount of diversity. Plants were made to grow cooperatively in communities and not to be competitive with each other.
I love that. I mean, but let's for people who aren't farmers who might be watching this because they're interested in, carbon drawdown or the climate or whatever. We had an idea for a long time in the farming community, or at least at the ag schools, from what I understand, that this diversity was that wasn't what was being taught. It was grow one thing or 3 things, but at different times. And there was a sense that having too many plants on the ground, they would be competing for the nutrients in the ground. And so that was not, we had a different idea about how agriculture actually worked. Now that this is not going back thousands of years, it's just going back to the 1950s, right after the war, from my understanding. So this is a kind of a new idea that's actually an old idea that's been rediscovered, that we're not competing by having all these various plants, but we're actually increasing the fertility and the water holding capacity of the soils by increasing that soil organic matter. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think it is. And there's a potential if I had my cover crops planted at the same time as my cash crop, and Brian can maybe talk about this a little bit. We did some experimentation with that. We're not doing it on a large scale because it's very difficult and kind of risky. There could be some competition aspects there, but because cover crops are grown like after corn and before soybeans, or after wheat and before corn, they're typically out there when the cash crop is not growing. So the only way it really then becomes a competition or makes nutrients more scarce would be if you are removing all the nutrients that they're cycling or producing. So like if you go in there and you bale it up and haul all those bales away, then yeah, you are reducing the amount of nutrients available for that next crop. So we wouldn't consider that a true cover crop. Now, if you graze it, 80% of what goes in the front end of a cow is coming right back out the back end of the cow. So those nutrients, for the most part, are staying in the field. So we would still consider that a cover crop. So it's really only a competition for nutrients if you're physically removing that biomass or the grain, and then it's really no longer a cover crop. It's just another cash crop. Doesn't make it wrong. It's just, it's a decision that the producer has to make of what are their goals for when they're growing this. But yeah, Brian can talk a little bit about some of the things that we've done with corn interseeding.
Yeah.
What have you found out, Brian?
Well, first of all, I wanted to make a comment about, the traditional way of looking at, farming is, you need to put on so many pounds of fertilizer, whether it's nitrogen, phosphorus, potash, whatever, per yield that you're taking off. So it's an in and out system and not taking into effect anything about the biology, which is how most of us were taught, growing up. And still probably that's what the major teaching is in universities today. But the fact of the matter is, it's the biology that's feeding the plants. And so the point I wanted to make is, the diversity is important, but you talked about the off season. It's important to have that living root growing then, because we're feeding the plants year round. And like, it's December, 15th today, but our ground is not froze and our rye is still green. We still have cover crops out there that are functioning and respirating and bringing carbon into the soil, like you were talking. And so, that's what we want to get to, is always having a living root out there. The corn interseeding, I think it has a lot of merit. The big issue that we've probably come up is the resistant weeds. And, controlling those weeds in a monoculture is difficult without chemicals. And it's very difficult to raise an intercrop of covers in your growing crop without good chemicals, residual chemicals. So that's becoming an issue. That's why the grazing has a lot of merit. I think, I know we have customers that they may take a full year and just graze, grow cover crops and graze it. And you can argue that's not really a cover crop, that's a cash crop, but that's okay. I mean, we can do whatever, but we're generating income off that land and trying to restore it and try to reset, the biology. Just like I think, I'm trying to do a lot of learning with, our own health and resetting our gut microbiome. It's the same way with the soil. At some time we need to reset that. And that's the opportunity that cover crops have, and the need for good rotations. And I'm guilty. I don't rotate as much as I should because it's more difficult. It takes more work. You got to develop more and more. If you want to grow, 20 different things to sell, that means you need 20 different markets versus just going to the feedlot or the ethanol plant. So that's the challenge I think that modern agriculture has. But there's a lot of people like Keith have talked about that are doing different things and wanting to try different things. And livestock is probably one of our biggest areas that guys really buy into it early and often because they see a return right away.
You mean when you sell the cows, when you sell the
Well,
cattle?
well, when you're in a cover crop, you can graze that and you get,
you can graze first.
right.
And you get the extra nutrition on the back end. Yeah.
Right.
Well, this has been great. The other question that I had was, how much have you grown the cover crop business? I know you started in 2008, but yet, you had something like 9,000 customers. Somehow that number sticks in my mind. Where are you now? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's a little hard to judge because one of the things that's really grown in the last couple of years have been online sales and food plot sales. So, I mean, if you look at all those, I mean, there's probably 30,000 customers, but some of them are just buying very small packages. So, I would say, in the last 4 years, we probably average growing, 10% a year or so. So it's been good, steady growth. We've been able to manage it. Certainly we've seen an increase in the number of employees. We have, I think, 55 or 56 people working for us now, which, being based in a town of 200 people, I mean, that's pretty significant.
Are your kids still in that mix?
Yeah. So I've got 2 of my kids working full time. Brian's got, I guess 2 sons and a son-in-law working full time. So yeah, they're very much involved. We're really looking forward to our grandkids getting old enough now to where we can bring in that next generation of labor force. And that is one of the blessings. And frankly, one of the reasons that we did, want to start another enterprise, a complementary enterprise to farming, was to provide opportunity for kids if they wanted to come back. So that has been a blessing.
I love that. I love that. One other question. I want to get in a little bit on the policy before we end, but I had one other question. I was just looking over your website, which is really wonderful, and it was very apparent that you can, even if you have a backyard and you want to amend the soil, you can use cover crops. So, or even if you've got a kitchen garden, you can use cover crops to bring in the soil organic matter. Correct? I don't think people know that.
Soil health principles had no scale. If you're growing something, then you're involved in agriculture, and it might be grass. And so the first thing I would tell people, and they may not like to hear this, is stop killing your clover. I mean,
Yes, I agree.
the clover is trying to grow because your system needs a legume. It needs diversity out there. So, people's mindset has to change as to what looks like a beautiful yard. Just like, Brian and I, we had to change our perception of what looked like a beautiful field. It's not a perfectly clean tilled black field ready to be planted. That's just ugly to us now.
Mhm,
Has to
mhm.
be covered, and so it's the same way. We have to change our perception of what really looks like a nice healthy yard ecosystem, and it's not going to be perfectly manicured pure green grass by itself. And so
For sure.
yeah, there's
For sure.
lots of things that people can do, but just that clover wanting to grow is the natural system's way of saying we need diversity out here in order to make this work. And if you had clover growing out there, you likely would not have to fertilize your yard anymore too. So but yeah, all scales work. We work with, like I say, the online sales have really grown and exploded, and a lot of that is gardeners, backyard, homesteaders, food plotters, because
Mhm.
it's really all using the same type of plants to accomplish a lot of this.
No, I love that. And I think our listeners would be very interested because we have more than farmers and ranchers on the sites. But the last thing I wanted to touch on was you've been doing some work around the state in the policy arena from what I could see. And maybe you wanted, I think you've used our film a couple of times, which of course warms my heart.
Uh,
But if you want to tell us a little bit about that, that would be great.
well, yeah, and so first of all, I've been involved enough to know 100% for sure that I really don't want to be a politician, and hats off to the ones that are, because it is a challenging thing, and so I'm more than willing to help, reach out, share our experiences, make connections, do all those things. I don't want to be in the in the full-blown mix of it. But yeah, we have used the film, and in fact, we've got some upcoming events where we're going to be showing the film,
Great.
because it's a powerfully made, beautiful way to show people, especially non-farmers, what the power of these plants, what the power of regenerative agriculture is. And so it speaks well to all audiences, but especially non-farmers. And then it opens up a dialogue, opens up a conversation. We were down in Oklahoma with the Oklahoma Conservation District. They had a bunch of their senators because it was right there in Oklahoma City. And yeah, had a really good dialogue about what does that mean? What policy shifts need to be made in order to incentivize more people to do this. So it is a powerful tool. We'll be doing something here in Nebraska in February, where hopefully we can get some of our state senators there as well.
Be great. That would be great. Very happy to hear this. Well, is there anything that you wanted to ask us or that we've ignored that, or just tell us about some things that are important right now to you?
Well, I guess, I would be curious, what have you been hearing? Have you gotten a lot of response from different audiences? How has the film impacted them? What shifts or changes have you seen, since the release of it?
Well, it's really interesting. I'm pretty close to Michael Doan, who, of course, you all know from the Nature Conservancy. He's head of worldwide, I think it's agriculture and fresh water. And he was in the film. We'll
Yep.
be interviewing him next week. But the the UN is completely on board now. I don't know if you knew anything about the COP28 UN meeting, but the agriculture was at the center. And also what Michael calls it the Nature Conservancy, nature-based solutions. That's not just their term, but that's so growing more trees, of course, but people are still focused on trees as a carbon sink rather than soil, when in fact soil is the bigger carbon sink. So there's some statistic I was reading recently that if we have the potential of drawing down 30% of the CO2 that's in the atmosphere into the ground where it belongs, simply through nature-based solutions. And to me, that's a very hopeful and big deal. So, you know, that's happening. I don't know, we hear from people, strange organizations that just absolutely love our film. And that is great. You know, you make a film and you don't always know what impact it has, but we're continuing to do the social media because we have, I don't know how many people, maybe 50,000 on our Facebook. That's a big audience. They're interested. And on, I'm not a big social media person, but we also have an Instagram, and there's quite a few on that. We do short things on that. So the word is getting out that we grow healthier food by taking care of our soil, and that helps the farmers and the ranchers who are, you know, growing, who are the heroes, in my opinion, who are growing this food. It's healthier for the planet, it's healthier for uh, people, and it's healthier for families, and it's the right thing to do. And so there's a lot of people interested. It's great. Big difference from 4 years ago.
The one thing I guess I would like to add is just, you know, encouraging, you know, farmers out there now, and, you know, getting their kids, their grandkids involved, and even young people in general. You know, because we need to get agriculture's, you know, as a population is shrinking, and we need to reverse that. And there's a book I just read, just called Small Farm Republic, but talking about, you know, it's the small farms that can save this country and bring back to the basically local, you know. And we need, the only way the community is going to survive is for people to create jobs. And I think that's what regenerative ag at its core can do. You know, it's regenerate those relationships with the community, and you know, reinvent the farmers market, or whatever. You know, we can utilize technology now and have kiosk type things, you know. But you know, it's about marketing, but that's what young people like to do, you know, and to involve them and get them out there and motivated. So we need to be thinking about agriculture differently than, like I said, growing corn and soybeans for fuel. And, you know, they talk about all this, you know, jet fuel and biodiesel and stuff, but it's not really where we need to be. You know, we need to be, you know, focusing the best land to grow the best food, you know, to regenerate God's creation, which ultimately is each one of us.
That's
And
right. Yeah.
that's all our goal is, to regenerate, steward, and share God's creation. So, you know, I think that's, you know, where we're headed and where we want to continue to head, and try to bring as many people along with us as we can.
I think you're doing a great job. Thank you so much. And just for our viewers, I want to tell me exactly what your website is called so that people can go to it and find out more about cover crops, and also how they might even be interested in buying the cover crops for their, you know, small plot farm, or their backyard, or whatever. Is it green covered seeds?
It's just greencover.com, greencover.com. And there is a whole section on our website for the, you know, for the backyard gardener, the homesteader, and that will give a lot of resources and information about how to do this on small scales, links to, you know, if you want to purchase seed, you can do that too. And then we have lots and lots of great videos on our YouTube channel as well. So just go to YouTube and search Green Cover, and you know, you can subscribe to that if you want and get, you know, future updates. But there's just lots of great content. We've done a lot of interviews and webinars with, you know, with the leaders in the movement, and that's all documented there.
That is great. Thank you so much. Well, I really appreciate your time. And it's a Friday afternoon, so I'm sure everybody wants to rest. But thanks so much. It's wonderful to talk to you both.
Well, it was great catching